We are diving deep today into a case that, well, security analysts almost immediately called more than just a crime.
Hmm.
We're trying to step back from the immediate headlines, the emotion of it all, and really examine the complex, difficult questions raised by the Dallas ICE facility shooting.
Exactly.
Mm.
And to do that, we're relying on a very specific analytical framework.
Mm.
Our source material for this deep dive comes directly from excerpts of proprietary documents
Yeah.
from the LoopCourt briefing series, and this one is titled Dallas ICE Facility Shooting, A Guide to the Case.
And just so everyone's clear on where this analysis comes from, the sources themselves, this specific guide was authored by Devin McClarty.
That's right.
It's owned by D Investment Enterprise, LLC, and published by D Publishing Group. So we're using this focused analytical guide as like a lens.
Yeah, a lens to pull out the facts, to try and understand the motive, and maybe most importantly, to explore the really critical legal and social implications this whole event forces on us. Our mission here really is to get beyond just the event itself and face that central strategic question raised in the analysis. Was this act, a sniper targeting detained immigrants? Was it purely a political statement?
Or something.
Or was it the action of maybe an individual who just became spontaneously radicalized? Because that distinction, well, it fundamentally changes how federal agencies have to respond to threats like this.
Absolutely. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start by establishing the core facts, and we'll try to adopt that sort of precise tone from those initial reports.
All right. So the incident happened at the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Field Office in Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
And the time was early, around 6:40 a.m. on September 24th, 2025. That timing itself suggests planning, right? Calculated impact.
Yeah, that early hour feels deliberate. And then the attack method detailed in the analysis. I mean, it's chilling how efficient it seemed.
It is. The shooter had set up a sniper position on a nearby rooftop
Right.
and opened fire on a van. And critically, that van was inside the facility's sally port.
Okay, maybe we should quickly explain what a sally port is for anyone listening who might not know.
Good point. So sally port is basically a controlled, high-security entrance or exit. Think of it like a secure box or a double gate system.
Right, like an airlock for vehicles.
Exactly. Vehicles have to pass through one gate, it closes, then the next one opens. It's designed to trap potential intruders inside that controlled space.
But in this case, it trapped the victims.
Precisely. It effectively trapped the victims.
And the victims, the analysis states clearly, were 3 detainees inside that van. They were struck by the gunfire.
Tragically, yes. 2 died, and 1 was left in critical condition.
And here's what's absolutely crucial for this whole analysis. What really separates this event, say, from an attack directly on the agents. No ICE agents or any law enforcement personnel were reported injured. 0.
That's a vital detail. Now, the shooter. The shooter died by a self-inflicted gunshot wound. So it's classified as a murder-suicide scenario.
Which means, with the perpetrator deceased, the physical evidence becomes absolutely everything.
Everything. And the analysis really highlights one piece of evidence above all others. Unspent shell casings found near the sniper position.
And those casings, they weren't blank. They had something inscribed on them.
Yes. A stark, unambiguous message. Anti-ICE.
Wow. Okay.
And that single piece of evidence, according to this framework we're using, immediately shifts the entire case. It moves it out of the realm of, say, standard violent crime.
Right.
The analysis pivots the focus completely from just what happened to why it happened.
Yeah.
It positions this as a premeditated political action.
So it's fascinating how this analytical framework then breaks down why this is seen as more than just a tragic crime, why it's considered like a landmark security event. It isolates 3 main reasons.
Yeah, the first reason is the undeniable potential here for political violence. We look at the evidence.
Okay.
The specific choice of the ICE facility, the specialized sniper setup that takes planning, and then that clear ideological message left behind on the casings. Exactly. It all strongly suggests meticulous planning. This wasn't random. The analysis frames it as a demonstration, a targeted political statement, and that immediately raises the security stakes.
But the motive seems so precisely focused on who the victims were. That leads to the second reason the analysis highlights, right? The focus was squarely on the detainees, not the agents running the place.
That's the critical distinction, yes. Targeting detainees serves a completely different symbolic purpose than attacking agents.
How so?
Well, the analysis suggests that this was likely an effort to undermine the institution itself, ICE, by attacking the very people under its protection. It makes a statement about the system, the whole apparatus, rather than just being about revenge against personnel.
Okay, I see. It's attacking the function, not just the people doing the job.
Precisely. And that ties directly into the third reason. The just overwhelming evidence of ideological motive thanks to those anti-ICE inscriptions.
It's hard to argue with that.
Very hard. That inscription is direct physical evidence. It indicates the shooter's actions were driven by a belief system specifically opposing this government agency. The analysis is really clear on this point.
Yeah.
The combination of factors, the sniper position, the highly specific target choice, meaning the detainees, and that explicit ideological marking, it all points definitively away from randomness.
Yeah.
It points towards a premeditated political statement.
Okay, so if the analytical approach is pretty confident this was premeditated ideological violence, then the next logical step is looking at the fallout, the systemic impact.
Right.
And the framework we're using lays out 5 complex questions that, security experts and legal minds are now urgently asking because of this case. Let's try and break those down.
Okay. The first one, and it's really the central strategic question, is ideological terrorism or spontaneous radicalization.
Right. That distinction matters legally, doesn't it?
Hugely. Terrorism implies a sophisticated political agenda, maybe even wider influence, maybe groups involved, though not necessarily. Spontaneous radicalization suggests more of a solitary individual who snapped, even if they ended up using sophisticated methods to carry out their act.
And the sources seem to lean heavily toward premeditation here, just given the tactical choices made. I mean, like you said, you don't just spontaneously decide to set up a sniper nest on a roof at dawn.
Exactly. The source material notes that the use of a sophisticated sniper setup argues very strongly for planning, for reconnaissance, preparation.
Yeah.
That complexity pushes the discussion much closer to classifying it as ideological terrorism, which means future threat assessments have to seriously consider not just organized groups, but also highly capable lone actors driven by deep ideological conviction.
Okay. The next question deals with a very practical physical failure, security breach and institutional liability. The analysis is pretty blunt here. How on earth was the shooter able to get a clear, unobstructed line of fire into what should be the most secure processing area, that Sally Port of a federal facility?
Yeah, this is a massive operational failure being highlighted. We're talking about critical infrastructure security.
Absolutely.
The analysis demands answers. Who is responsible for the security perimeter beyond the actual fence line? Did the facility's security assessments properly map out all potential vantage points from surrounding buildings?
Good question.
This incident really exposes a fundamental vulnerability, particularly in urban settings, for federal installations.
And I can see how that flows right into question 3, which steps into the legal realm, the government's duty of care towards those detainees.
Yes, this is a really powerful legal concept. When the government takes custody of someone, even if they're a detainee pending immigration status, it assumes a legal and, frankly, a moral duty of care, responsibility for that person's safety.
Usually we think of that in terms of things happening inside the facility, right? Like medical neglect or abuse by guards.
That's generally how it's applied, yes. Internal issues.
But an external ideological attack. Wow, that really complicates that duty, doesn't it?
It complicates it dramatically. The analysis raises these serious, fundamental questions about whether that duty of care was actually met when detainees were killed by an external threat.
Right.
It forces federal agencies to analyze how they can possibly protect vulnerable people in their custody from external, politically motivated threats that might come from, hundreds of yards away. It could potentially redefine the entire scope of required protection.
Okay, moving to the 4th angle, this one hits that national conversation this case inevitably sparks. The line between protest and incitement. The shooter left that explicit ideological marker, anti-ICE. So how does society distinguish between protected free speech, protesting government policy, and rhetoric that might inspire, or worse, enable violence?
This is maybe the thorniest social question highlighted in the analysis. The sources really underscore the challenge of drawing a clear, enforceable legal line between, on the one hand, aggressive political protest against an agency like ICE, which is absolutely protected speech.
Right.
And on the other hand, political rhetoric that gets interpreted by someone unstable or already radicalized as an explicit call to arms, a justification for violence.
It really puts the burden back on public discourse, doesn't it? The analysis seems to implicitly question the role of, say, public figures or online platforms whose very high-volume criticism might be interpreted by some as justifying lethal action.
Exactly. It forces society to grapple with this.
Yeah.
There's the chilling effect this kind of violence could have on legitimate protests, people becoming afraid to speak out.
Sure.
But at the same time, you have to acknowledge that in this kind of environment, words can have consequences, real consequences measured in casualties. The ideological nature of this specific attack makes that distinction urgent, but also incredibly difficult, maybe impossibly vague, to pin down legally.
Yeah, incredibly difficult. Okay, finally, the fifth question looks ahead. What precedent does this set for future dangers? Because let's face it, if this method of attack was seen as successful in making a political statement, well, that sends a dangerous signal.
It does. Security experts, according to the sources, are focused on two major risks stemming from this. First, just the raw fear that this successful, very high-profile act could embolden copycats.
Makes sense.
Copycats looking to replicate the strategy specifically, using a distant sniper position to target vulnerable, controlled entry points at government facilities.
And the second risk, it forces pretty much every federal agency to immediately rethink its defenses, right?
Yes, absolutely. The analysis anticipates that ICE, and likely other federal agencies too, will have to drastically change their security protocols.
How so? Like what kind of changes?
Well, it likely means investing heavily in hardening targets, physically making them tougher to attack, adjusting threat assessments to prioritize threats coming from adjacent buildings, not just at the gate, and possibly even changing how they move and process detainees, especially in those vulnerable areas like Sally ports. The framework really suggests this event is going to lead to a complete overhaul of operational security, particularly in urban centers.
It sounds like the sources have effectively framed this not just as a tragedy, but as a crucial case study in modern domestic extremism. The impact is clearly going to ripple through law enforcement, legal precedent, probably for years to come.
Yeah, if we tie this back to the bigger picture, the analysis confirms this is viewed pretty much across the board as a definitive statement attack.
Why?
It has unmistakable ideological underpinnings.
Right.
And the conclusion reached by this specific framework that the evidence basically eliminates doubt about premeditated political violence that makes this a landmark event. It's going to help define how we assess these kinds of threat vectors moving forward.
So what does all this mean for you, the listener, trying to make sense of it? The analysis we've been digging into really frames this shooting as a genuine turning point, a turning point in how society understands violence against government institutions and maybe just as critically, the political rhetoric that swirls around them.
And that's societal interpretation. That's the enduring legacy here. The ultimate verdict isn't just about the facts of what happened that morning in Dallas.
No.
No, the framework suggests the real verdict is on how we as a society interpret what this act means, what it means for our future, for the security of our institutions, and maybe for the very limits of political protest.
So the final sort of provocative thought for you to consider drawn from this analytical approach is this. The Dallas ICE facility shooting didn't just expose a vulnerability in a building's physical security.
Right.
It exposed a fundamental crack, perhaps, at the intersection of American political discourse and domestic security. And that crack, well, it's going to take years to understand, let alone mend. That's the complexity we're all left dealing with.